What happens when a Hollywood A-lister sits down for what should be a routine late-night interview, only to find themselves under attack by their own host? You won't believe what unfolds when Mark Wahlberg faces off against Jimmy Kimmel in what becomes one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. The tension builds slowly, then erupts into a full-blown war of words that leaves audiences stunned and one major star walking off set. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses clash in front of a live studio audience. The stage was set for what appeared to be another typical Tuesday night episode. Mark Wahlberg, promoting his latest action thriller, walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel Live set with his characteristic confident stride, waving to the enthusiastic crowd. The audience erupted in cheers as the Boston native settled into the guest chair, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit jacket with the casual ease of someone who'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Kimmel opened with his standard monologue. Energy, that practiced smile plastered across his face as he shuffled through his note cards. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Wahlberg is here tonight, and I have to say, Mark, you look fantastic. Still hitting the gym at 4 in the morning. Wahlberg chuckled, his Boston accent thick as ever. Jimmy, you know me, man. Discipline is everything. While you're probably rolling out of bed at noon, I've already had 2 workouts and a full day of meetings. The audience laughed, but there was something in Kimmel's expression that shifted almost imperceptibly. His smile tightened just a fraction, and those who knew him well might have recognized the subtle warning signs. Well, we can't all be perfect, Mark. Some of us have real jobs that keep us up late, entertaining America. The comment hung in the air for a moment longer than it should have. Wahlberg's eyebrows raised slightly, but he maintained his composure. Real jobs? That's interesting, Jimmy. I thought making movies and creating jobs for hundreds of people counted as real work. But hey, what do I know? Kimmel's laugh felt forced now, and he quickly moved to shuffle his cards again. Let's talk about your new movie. Another action film where you play the tough guy from Boston. Are you ever going to branch out? Or is this just your comfort zone? The question itself wasn't unusual for a talk show interview, but the tone carried an edge that made the studio audience shift uncomfortably in their seats. Wahlberg's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his media training kicked in. You know, Jimmy, I've actually done quite a bit of dramatic work. The Fighter, The Departed, Three Kings. But I guess you were too busy writing jokes about celebrities to notice actual filmmaking. The tension in the room was becoming palpable now. Camera operators exchanged glances, and the show's producers in the booth were already reaching for their headsets. This wasn't going according to the pre-interview script they'd agreed upon. Kimmel leaned back in his chair, that fake smile never wavering. Oh, I notice plenty, Mark. I notice when actors think they're bigger than the shows that made them famous. I notice when people forget where they came from. Where I came from. Wahlberg's voice dropped to a lower register, the kind of tone that anyone who grew up in Dorchester would recognize as a warning. Jimmy, I think you're confusing me with someone else. I've never forgotten where I came from. That's why I work my ass off every single day instead of sitting behind a desk making cheap shots at people who are actually out there grinding. The audience was dead silent now. This wasn't the playful banter they'd come to expect from late night television. This felt real, raw, and increasingly dangerous. Kimmel's composure was starting to crack. Grinding? Is that what we're calling it when you charge $20 million to play the same character in every movie? At least I'm honest about what I do for a living. Honest. Wahlberg laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about honest? Let's talk about how you built your career making fun of people who can't fight back. Let's talk about how you hide behind your writers and your laugh track when things get real. The host's face was flushing now, that practiced television smile finally beginning to slip. I don't hide behind anything, Mark. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've interviewed everyone from presidents to pop stars. I think I know how to handle one actor from Boston who thinks he's tougher than he actually is. That last comment landed like a physical blow. Wahlberg's entire demeanor changed in an instant. He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes locked on Kimmel's with an intensity that made the temperature in the room seem to drop 10 degrees. Thinks he's tougher than he actually is? Wahlberg's voice was deadly quiet now. Jimmy, you really want to go down this road? Because I promise you, this isn't going to end the way you think it is. The show's band members were looking around, nervously, and the audience sat in stunned silence. Even the camera operators seemed unsure whether they should keep rolling or look away. This had gone far beyond awkward television into something that felt genuinely volatile. Kimmel, perhaps sensing he'd pushed too far but unable to back down now, doubled down instead. "What road is that, Mark? The road where you storm off my set? Like some kind of diva? Go ahead. Show America what kind of professional you really are." The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun, and everyone in that studio knew that whatever happened next would define not just this interview, but possibly both men's careers. Wahlberg sat perfectly still for a moment that felt like an eternity, his eyes never leaving Kimmel's face, and the silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. The silence that followed Kimmel's challenge was deafening. You could hear a pin drop in that studio as Mark Wahlberg processed what had just been said to him on live television. His fingers drummed once against the arm of his chair, a subtle tell that anyone who knew him would recognize as a warning sign. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing every micro-expression as he made a decision that would change everything. "You know what, Jimmy?" Wahlberg's voice was controlled, but there was steel underneath it. "I came here tonight as a professional. I came here to promote my movie, talk to your audience, maybe have some laughs. But you seem to have a different agenda." Kimmel shifted in his seat, suddenly looking less confident than he had moments before. The power dynamic in the room was shifting, and everyone could feel it. "I don't have any agenda, Mark. I'm just trying to have a conversation." "A conversation?" Wahlberg let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you call it when you ambush your guests? When you sit there behind your desk throwing cheap shots because you think you're untouchable?" The host's jaw tightened. "Nobody's throwing cheap shots here. I'm asking legitimate questions. If you can't handle a little pushback, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." That comment was the match that lit the fuse. Wahlberg's composure finally cracked, and the Boston street fighter that still lived beneath the Hollywood polish came roaring to the surface. "Can't handle pushback? Jimmy, let me tell you something about handling things. I've been handling things since I was 13 years old, running these streets when you were probably still getting your lunch money stolen. You want to question my professionalism? My work ethic? The way I conduct myself in this business?" The audience was completely captivated now, watching this train wreck unfold in real time. Some were pulling out their phones, despite security's attempts to keep them away. This was the kind of television moment that would be replayed for years to come. Kimmel's face was getting redder by the second. "I'm questioning whether someone who's built their entire career on playing tough guys actually has anything real underneath all that posturing." Posturing. Wahlberg stood up so abruptly that his chair rolled backward. The sudden movement made several people in the front row flinch. "You think this is posturing? You want to see something real?" Security guards near the stage perked up, their hands moving instinctively toward their radios. The show's producers were frantically gesturing from the booth, but there was no stopping this runaway train now. Kimmel, perhaps realizing he'd awakened something he couldn't control, tried to regain his composure. "Mark, come on, sit down. We're on live television here." "Oh, now you're worried about being on live television." Wahlberg's voice was rising, his Boston accent getting thicker with every word. "You weren't worried about that when you decided to turn this into some kind of character assassination. You weren't worried about professionalism when you started running your mouth." The host made the critical mistake of trying to regain control through mockery. "Character assassination? Mark, you're being a little dramatic here. This is just television. Maybe you should save the acting for your movies." The insult hit its mark perfectly, and Wahlberg's response was immediate and devastating. "Acting? You want to talk about acting? At least when I act, people know it's a performance. You've been acting like you're some kind of respectable journalist for 20 years, but everyone in this town knows what you really are." "And what's that?" Kimmel shot back, his own professionalism finally abandoning him completely. "A bully with a microphone. A guy who never grew out of high school, sitting behind his desk making jokes about people who actually accomplished something with their lives. You know what the difference is between you and me, Jimmy? When I was a punk kid making mistakes, I owned up to them. I did the work to become better. But you? You just found a way to get paid for staying exactly the same petty person you always were." The crowd was in complete shock. Some were cheering, others were gasping, but everyone was leaning forward in their seats. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a public execution happening in real time that Kimmel's face had gone from red to nearly purple. You don't know anything about me or what I've accomplished. I've built this show from nothing. I've interviewed presidents, celebrities, world leaders. I don't need some washed-up rapper turned actor lecturing me about professionalism. The washed-up rapper comment was the final straw. Wahlberg took a step toward the desk, and suddenly every security guard in the building was on high alert. Washed up. His voice was deadly quiet now, more dangerous than when he'd been shouting. Jimmy, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've produced movies, I've built businesses, I've created jobs for thousands of people. And you know what? I did it all without having to tear other people down to make myself feel important. Kimmel was trapped now, caught between his ego and the growing realization that he'd pushed too far. I don't tear people down. I'm a comedian. It's what I do. No, Jimmy. What you do is hide behind that title when people call you out on your behavior. Oh, I'm just a comedian. I was just joking. But there's nothing funny about what you're doing right now. This isn't comedy. This is just mean-spirited garbage from someone who never learned how to be a man. The personal attack sent Kimmel over the edge. He stood up behind his desk, pointing an accusatory finger at his guest. How dare you come on my show and talk to me like that? This is my house. These are my people. You're nothing but a guest here, and you'll show me the respect I deserve. Wahlberg laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any warmth or humor. Respect? Jimmy, respect is earned. And right now, you're showing everyone exactly why you don't deserve any. The confrontation had reached a boiling point, with both men standing and facing off across the desk like gladiators in an arena. The audience didn't know whether to cheer or call security, and the entire production crew was frozen in place, watching their carefully controlled show spiral completely out of control. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point, with both men glaring at each other across the desk like prize fighters waiting for the bell. The audience sat in stunned silence, phones recording despite security's protests, knowing they were witnessing television history in the making. What none of them expected was for Jimmy Kimmel to make the most catastrophic decision of his career. You know what, Mark? Kimmel's voice was shaking with rage now, all pretense of being a professional host completely abandoned. Since you want to talk about respect and being a man, let's talk about your past. Let's talk about all those things you did before you became Hollywood's golden boy. The color drained from Wahlberg's face. Everyone in that studio could feel the shift. This had just crossed a line that should never be crossed. The actor's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Jimmy, don't. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than all his previous shouting. Don't you dare go there. But Kimmel was too far gone, too caught up in his own humiliation to recognize the warning. Why not? You came on my show, you disrespected me in front of my audience, you questioned my integrity. So let's question yours. Let's talk about the real Mark Wahlberg before the PR machine cleaned up your image. The studio had gone completely silent. Even the band members had stopped fidgeting. Everyone understood they were witnessing something that would have massive consequences, but nobody knew how to stop it. Wahlberg took a slow, deliberate step closer to the desk. Jimmy, I'm going to give you one chance to walk this back. One chance to remember that you're supposed to be a professional, that this is supposed to be entertainment, not a hit job. Kimmel's response sealed his fate. Or what? You'll do what? You did back in Boston? Show everyone the real tough guy underneath all that Hollywood polish. The reference to his troubled youth hit Wahlberg like a physical blow, and for a moment, the mask completely slipped. The pain, the regret, the years of work to become a better man, all of it was written across his face for everyone to see. You son of a bitch. The words came out quietly, but they carried the weight of 30 years of redemption being thrown back in his face. I came here tonight to do a job, to be professional, to promote my movie and give your audience a good show. But you had to make it personal. Kimmel, perhaps finally realizing he'd gone too far, tried to backtrack. Mark, look, I was just… No. Wahlberg's voice cut through the attempted apology like a blade. You don't get to walk it back now. You wanted to see the real me? You wanted to drag up my past on live television? Fine. Let's talk about the real Jimmy Kimmel. The host's face went pale. Mark, come on. Let's talk about a guy who's so insecure about his own career that he has to tear down people who've actually accomplished something. Let's talk about someone who's built his entire persona around making other people feel small, because that's the only way he can feel big. Wahlberg was moving around the desk now, and security was starting to get nervous, but something in his demeanor kept them from intervening. This wasn't physical violence. This was something much more devastating. You want to know what the difference is between my past and yours, Jimmy? I was a kid. I made mistakes. I hurt people, and I've spent every day since then trying to make up for it. I've used my platform to help kids avoid the mistakes I made. I've put my money where my mouth is, building programs, supporting communities, actually making a difference. Kimmel was backing away now, the fight completely gone out of him. Mark, please, but you? You're a grown man who still acts like a high school bully. You've had 20 years to grow up, 20 years to use your platform for something positive. And instead you chose to stay exactly the same petty, mean-spirited person you've always been. The audience was completely transfixed. Some were filming, others had their hands over their mouths in shock. This wasn't just a celebrity meltdown. This was one human being holding another accountable in the most public way possible. Every night, you sit behind this desk and you mock people. Politicians, celebrities, regular folks who just wanted their 15 minutes of fame. You've made a career out of punching down, and you've convinced yourself that it's okay because you call it comedy. Wahlberg was standing directly in front of Kimmel now, close enough that the cameras caught every word, every expression. But tonight, you messed with the wrong guy. Tonight, you tried to hurt someone who's actually done the work to be better than he was. Kimmel's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like a man who'd just realized he'd brought a knife to a gunfight. You know what, Jimmy? I actually feel sorry for you. Because 20 years from now, when people talk about your career, they won't remember the interviews or the jokes. They'll remember this moment. They'll remember the night you showed everyone exactly who you really are. Wahlberg straightened his jacket and looked directly into the main camera. To everyone watching at home, I want you to know that this isn't what professionalism looks like. This isn't what respect looks like. And this sure as hell isn't what entertainment should be. He turned back to Kimmel, who was still standing frozen behind his desk. I came here to do a job, and I did it. I answered your questions, I was respectful to your audience, and I conducted myself like a professional. But you decided to turn this into something ugly, something personal. The actor began walking toward the exit, but he wasn't done yet. He stopped and turned back one final time. You know what the saddest part is, Jimmy? You could have been better than this. You had the platform, you had the audience, you had the opportunity to actually make people's lives a little brighter. But instead, you chose to be small. You chose to be cruel. And that's on you. Wahlberg looked around the studio one last time, making eye contact with audience members who would never forget this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. You deserve better entertainment than what you got, and I apologize that my presence here contributed to this disaster. With that, he walked off the stage with the same confident stride he'd entered with, leaving behind a studio full of stunned people and one devastated host who finally understood the magnitude of what he'd done. Kimmel stood behind his desk for several long seconds, the silence stretching endlessly as cameras continued to roll. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. We'll be right back after this commercial break. But everyone in that studio knew there would be no coming back from this. The damage was done, the footage was captured, and within hours, the entire world would see exactly what happened. When Jimmy Kimmel pushed the wrong man to FAR.as, Mark Wahlberg disappeared through the exit doors. He left behind more than just an unfinished interview. He left behind a career-defining moment that would be replayed, analyzed, and remembered long after both men were gone. And in that moment, everyone watching understood they had witnessed something unprecedented, the complete and total destruction of a bully by someone who refused to be bullied. The show would go on, but nothing would ever be the same.